In fact, the long career of the term Einfühlung, which I will briefly introduce, was interrupted in the early 20th century not only by Bertolt Brecht, who aligned Einfühlung with the then contemporary understanding of Aristotelian catharsis, as well as the tradition of naturalism in the theater, both of which he sought to dispense with, while working towards a more politically engaged aesthetic form. A critique prior to Brecht's, however, had been perhaps even more destructive to the legacy of Einfühlung. In his doctoral thesis, Abstraktion und Einfühlung, or as it's translated, Abstraktion and Empathy, which was first published in 1907 and has never been out of print since then, and continues to be widely read within the context of art history, the art historian Wilhelm Worringer contrasted three-dimensional space, or the three-dimensional space required, according to Worringer, by Einfühlung, with the flat space of abstraction, which was at that point in time a newly significant term. But in both accounts, whether Brecht's or Worringer's, but for different reasons, Einfühlung was made to stand in for the traditions of the past, for sentimental and intellectually unstimulating empathy with human figures and their motives and emotions. So basically, these are the terms that are at play in these critiques. But the question I want to pose is really, do we have the wrong idea about empathy? And to address that, we have to return to Einfühlung, I would argue. So what I want to do is just really briefly situate Farocki's own revision in his paper and his work in the context of film theory and production from the 1960s forward, and also situate Einfühlung in the system of dueling allegiances in which it came about, that is, within both psychology and philosophy or aesthetic theory. And this requires some attention to the German roots of the word empathy, and avoids the, I would argue, not very helpful discussions that often go on with regards to, is it sympathy, is it compassion, what is it, and go straight forward to the issues at stake that were present within the term Einfühlung. I want to also simultaneously question the source of the impulse in question with Einfühlung at all. You have to keep in mind that some of the sources for what's going on with Einfühlung are animism, and in that case, with clear romantic links, but also it's a significant term for experimental psychology, and also for projection theory. Also, I mean, I can also return to this at the end, but I think one of the really interesting things about the debate around Einfühlung is the impression that Brecht was really after a disengagement of emotion in his work. And that certainly is something that one would believe if one watched the films of the 60s and 70s that were taking up Brecht again from a new perspective. Whereas that's very hotly debated in Brecht scholarship. And it would seem that almost immediately following statements with regards to Einfühlung, he didn't disavow emotion per se. And so a really key question we need to ask ourselves is, what is the relationship between emotion and cognition, and between passivity and activity? Okay, the term empathy was coined in an early translation, or actually summary, from German to English, and has since become established in the English language. In Germany, Empathie is widely accepted, above all in the field of psychology, and especially in relation to emotional correspondences in interpersonal relations. Despite the fact that the word empathy is often used as a translation of Einfühlung, the two terms have come to have both distinct meanings and disciplinary affiliations, with the former, that is, empathy, primarily being associated with the realm of psychology and social science research, and the latter, Einfühlung, viewed as an issue of usually only historical importance for aesthetic theory in general and for art history in particular. Einfühlung rose to particular prominence during the last third of the 19th century and examined a variety of forms of intense involvement with aesthetic objects. Whether studies of empathy make mention of Einfühlung as empathy's precursor or not, with only few exceptions, contemporary accounts focus on the forms of empathy that are instilled by our alignment with animate and mainly human figures, and thereby overlook the broader, often more abstract sense of engagement with the world and with the aesthetic object that was central to Einfühlung as it was historically understood.